Welcome to the Rare Earth Exchanges podcast, where power, politics, and the world's most coveted materials collide. Rare earth elements power the backbone of tomorrow's most critical technologies. With China dominating global production, the U.S. and its allies must align strategically to ensure a stable future. This urgency prompted tech entrepreneurs Daniel O'Connor and Dustin Olsen to launch Rare Earth Exchanges, a news and insight platform built to equip stakeholders and decision makers with the tools and intelligence needed to reduce dependency and build prosperous resilience. Let's get into it.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Rare Earth Exchanges podcast. This week you've got myself and Daniel, and we're going to talk about some of the current events that are going on, some big things that are moving and shaking. So Daniel, how have you been since we last met?
Well, it's been busy. We have a lot going on with the website, Dustin. I mean, maybe we should update people just a little bit about what's going on with rareearthexchanges.com. The traffic is exploding. Maybe do you want to just provide a minute overview of what we're adding to the site?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So those who follow us, who subscribe, you're already in the know, but we've added a NdPr deposit and project ranking. We did a whole podcast on that a couple weeks ago and talking about how it works, why we did some of this. So that's on there. We just updated it today. So take a look at that. We got some things that are going on. And of course, we've got our forum that's gaining some momentum and traction there with people who just want to join the conversation. So yeah. That's it.
Can you hear me okay? Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it really is. And so last week we met with Brazilian Rare Earths. What's your key takeaways from that conversation that we had?
I think it's really exciting. I think they have a very potentially valuable series of deposits. It's a massive area in northeast Brazil. It's situated very strategically near a port. It's in the Bahia region. They have rich, from the measurements that we've seen, it's high concentrations of key rare earth elements, and it's near a petrochemical
100%.
processing
so it'll be
region,
exciting to see what they
adjacent, and they want to try to do a deal and do processing.
Anyway, so circling back, what is in the news this week that stood out to? What do you want to kick us off with?
Yes, yeah, they have the potential, if they can find the right partners, they have the potential to actually help the United States, I believe, become more independent of China. I will say, though, that they're business people, and we're trying to connect them to certain people that might be able to introduce them to folks in the government. They could easily sell, for example, to China. So Chinese companies. So I'm hoping that their business development marketing effort connects with the right investors and the right folks inside of the United States government. Yeah, so one interesting first piece of news is a subsidiary of China Minmetals, which is one of the biggest partially state-owned rare earth conglomerates, is breaking ground with a new deep sea mining effort. I think it's the first ever domestic environmental impact statement approved by the International Sea Authority. It's one of the first companies that is going to start at least a pilot effort looking at rare earths in the sea.
It's honestly crazy to think of deep sea mining.
It seems to be a first. That's according to the media from the Chinese company.
We have our own struggles.
We have to validate that
on dry
with other
ground.
Media sources.
I can't imagine
and other
struggles
sources on the ground potentially
under the water.
The milestone represents, really China's ambition to develop strategic critical minerals.
I think you called it out perfectly.
Directly from seabed resources.
China's not messing around.
Positioning that country as a leader in international deep sea mining. Now, we've been critical of deep sea mining. We believe we're kind of a long ways off from having that be prime time. But this latest news is interesting and could be significant. Again, the parent company is China Minmetals, okay? And there's a subsidiary company that's involved with the actual deep sea effort. So that's one piece of news, Dustin, that caught our attention.
Yep. Yeah, because they've dominated the midstream market, right? The process, the production of magnets and things like that. But they need something to feed that machine that they've built.
Very interesting.
And then what happens after it, right? Can they control the product that they produce, which is where we see companies like BYD come from, right? So
yes, they need ever-growing sources of deposits. So, it's a whole ecosystem and supply chain, right? From upstream, midstream, downstream. And what they're doing is upstream, they're constantly looking for more sources, and downstream, they're constantly looking how to innovate and differentiate from the West. Completely. Yes, that's right. That's right. BYD is part of that strategy that when we first launched this news site, we identified a three-pronged strategy
A lot of
that
people don't
I
view it
think
that
it's
way,
important
though.
to remind everybody. Phase one was monopolize the rare earth elements and some critical minerals. Phase two is the value-added product, so the innovation that comes from controlling that supply chain. So advancing new materials in steel, in textiles, in medical products, devices. Rare earths are inputs for lots of different things, military applications. Then phase three is dominate with new types of, green products like electric vehicles, for example, like BYD.
Here
And
we
then the
are.
final phase
It's
is digital currency,
it's a
is basically
situation where we're
becoming the
just
number
like,
one economy
and some people have
and
already asked, like, how do we find
having
ourselves
at
here?
least some governance
But I'd
over
say the
digital
broader
currencies.
population still
That's
hasn't
why
asked that
we're
question.
in the situation we are. That's why
I just
President Trump is
they're just not aware.
hunkering down in emergency mode. Because in many ways, Dustin, it is an emergency. No, they don't. Well, they just think it's business as usual, but they
Yeah.
don't view an emergency that
And for those who
all of
care,
our
what
critical
else showed
minerals
up
and
in the news that
rare earth elements
caught your attention?
are uh, controlled by another country that could be an adversary. I mean, they could be a trading partner, and they could be an adversary. But that's our leadership, our politicians, our corporate leaders that at every step along the way just sort of made short-term profit-driven decisions, leaving the U.S. civil society to be in a very vulnerable place. And here we are. I mean, the broader population, there's people, they're just thinking about fishing or, when they can go hunting or playing ball or, working on their car. Most people don't care about this kind of
So yeah,
stuff.
let's talk about that,
But
right?
some people do.
Because in a way, I could see it kind of like the climate here in the United States, right? People
Okay.
just
All
they're
right.
not dialed
Well,
in.
we covered this
They're more
before,
interested
but
in their own
we kind of
hobbies and
covered it
their own
again.
lives,
Australia is
right? They don't
working on this
understand
1.2
the
billion
bigger picture. So do
Australian,
you
that's
think
about
that's the same
800 million or
situation in
so,
Australia of
mineral stockpile
we don't
to
support this,
stabilize
or
supply
what's your
chains and
take on that?
reduce dependence on China. Part of this quote unquote ex-China market that's growing. The reserve targets critical minerals like lithium and cobalt, as well as rare earth elements. It's interesting. Industry leaders have had mixed reactions, with some seeing the potential benefits and others warning that it could distort markets. So it's interesting that this stockpile that Australia is working on, Dustin, that everybody is not behind it, which I found kind of interesting that everybody's not behind it. Well, it's different because these are insiders. Let me give you some examples. So based on, covered this when it was first announced, and recently mining.com covered it again. The writer, I want to give her credit. I don't know if I have her name here, but we like to give people credit when they write things, okay? And she spoke with some people about this. So as an example, Wailu Metals CEO Luca Giacovazzi, he praised the concept as a hybrid solution that could empower Australia to negotiate at the country level, especially when individual companies are too small to compete with vertically integrated Chinese entities. So remember that concept, Dustin, that the Chinese companies are mostly state owned or partially state owned, and they're not really free market actors. They're state actors, right? So you need the pro for this is you need the state to come in this case Australia, and support with like a stockpile. Okay. So as I was mentioning, Australia has proposed a $1.2 billion strategic mineral stockpile. And this is, interestingly enough, been embraced by many, but also some are concerned. As I mentioned, one CEO, Luca Giacovazzi with Wailu Metals, praised the concept as a hybrid solution that could empower Australia to negotiate at the country level, especially when individual companies are too small, for example, to compete with vertically integrated Chinese companies. And remember, Dustin, that's a key problem here, is that these Chinese companies are state actors, right? They're here to weaponize the minerals and the processing and the magnets for geopolitical aims, not just market profit and loss. Now, another CEO, Rowena Smith at ASM, also seems positive about the Australian move, echoing the other CEO, noting that international investors and off-takers are hesitant to commit to small, fragmented players. A government-backed framework, she argues, could build confidence and unlock capital for project scale up. So in any case, but were some groups that had concerns, skepticism. So for example, an example would be IGO Limited CEO Ivan Vela, who warns that the policy risks repeating the mistakes of Australia's wool reserve scheme, apparently around wool, which collapsed under mismanagement and oversupply decades ago. And Pilbara Minerals CEO Dale Henderson welcomed the consultation process, but emphasized that price support, not just offtake agreements, is essential for building resilient full supply chain capability. Also, critics point out that stockpiling raw materials does little good if processing remains outsourced to China, a weakness that still plagues many Australian projects, as we know. So some key risks and outstanding issues we raised with the Australian stockpile. One is, can the reserve provide price stability without distorting global markets? There's this concern it could distort global markets. Again, what we've tried to call attention to is that this is not a normal market. You have a state monopoly that's controlling all of it. So second, will this stockpile prioritize light or heavy rare earths? And how will it ensure downstream processing stays in Australia? Third, can the reserve avoid becoming a political tool or a drag on public finances if commodity prices crash? So what happens if China crashes the market, floods the market with cheap rare earth? They've been known to do that. Does this state-sponsored stockpile just become a basically expensive, I won't say the word. Finally, how will Canberra, the capital of Australia, balance short-term economic goals with long-term industrial policy? And, Dustin, this industrial policy topic is a key one. We write about this and speak about it here. It's important because, again, we're not dealing with a normal free market type of situation. It's not even like OPEC when, the oil producing countries kind of got together and squeezed the United States and others in the 70s. This is one country that has pretty much a complete monopoly.
It's wild. Yeah.
It's completely wild. Right now, just quickly, they've got a halt on heavy rare earths for military applications. We're having a hard time. I mean, I hear chatter. I can't validate it for sure that we only have so much stockpile defense contractors, and we've got a problem.
Yeah, it is a big problem. And yeah, competing with China, I've been reading a book and some other things, about business in China, and it's a different way of life over there, and it's interesting how competition handles each other, and it's often a race to the bottom. Who can be cheaper? Who can create the most broad adoption as fast as possible, right? And if you're the last one standing, you win.
You win.
And then you charge whatever you want.
But
you're the only option.
Here's a question for you, Dustin. Does that sound like communism? No. What's interesting is that it's a communist country, but they're using capitalistic tools, right?
Yeah.
It's a very interesting, it's a serious challenge for the United States because we had a competition during the Cold War with the Soviet Union, but that was military competition. They had a very large nuclear arsenal. They were not economic competition. We did not have economic competition. We do now.
We do now.
Another article to jump in is Victory Metals. And by the way, they want to talk with us. We might do an interview or something with us. They just raised $4 million in a private placement. This is an Australian company to accelerate Australia's largest heavy rare earth clay project. Apparently, it's called the Stanmore Project, and they claim it's Australia's largest clay-hosted heavy rare earth element deposit. And remember, China pretty much controls 100% of the heavies. There's a few deposits. Pass has some of it. There's the Australian Linus just processed some heavy rare earth commercially, but 95% for or more is in China. So this is a significant deposit potentially. This project aims to recover 7 strategic metals and position itself as a critical mineral supplier outside of China or ex-China. But we would say, again, we congratulated them. They want to speak with us. We want to help accelerate the ex-China market. That's one reason why we founded this company. Despite promising metallurgical tests results, however, the project remains in pre-feasibility stages, means there are significant technical and regulatory steps to take. Let's just put it to you that way. So it's still early days, but it's interesting and it sounds very promising.
That's great. Yeah.
Yes.
Because as you point out, right, we're promoting the ex-China market and the impact there. So we're hopeful, right? It'd be great to get them here on the show so we can hear from them, the progress they're making, the challenges they're up against, and ultimately the successes they're finding. So
For sure. Do I have time for a couple more?
yeah, we could probably do one more.
Okay. Well, we looked at India. We've been looking at them, and they're talking a good game about resilience and having their own industrial policy, but it's not quite there yet. I mean, again, this is the most populous nation in the world now and the 5th biggest economy. I think they have surpassed China in population, and they're number 5 now economically, and they're growing fast. They are actively working to reduce their 90% import dependence on China, 90%. Okay? They're looking at it through recycling, domestic production, and international partnerships. I like how the Indians are thinking. They're thinking a little bit more industrial policy-esque than we are at this point. Maybe behind closed doors, President Trump is ratcheting it up, but we're not sure yet. Now, India lacks midstream processing capabilities and has minimal rare earth magnet production capability. So they're still completely dependent on China pretty much. Their current rare earth element strategy remains largely aspirational, we called it. With small scale, these are the attributes today, Dustin. Small scale production, significant technological gaps to overcome and achieving true supply chain independence. And basically, so it's diversification on paper, we call it. So India is trying to position a resilient path forward. But again, when you look at the actual areas that they need to accelerate at to become independent, number one is recycling. And they do have an initiative called the Production Linked Incentives, which is a plan aiming to encourage the recovery of rare earth elements from e-waste. But remember, what we've reported on of all rare earth recycling, it adds up to about 5% at the most of like new magnets and such. So it's a very small percentage for recycling, although we have to go there. Now, the second piece is domestic development in India. They have a state-owned company called Indian Rare Earth Limited. We have reached out to them to talk with them. They're spearheading rare earth element extraction, and they've commissioned a new rare earth permanent magnet manufacturing plant in a central eastern coastal city called Visakhapatnam, with a modest annual capacity right now of 3,000 kilograms. Finally, they are looking at international partnerships, something that we have been encouraging our government to do. Right? We've been encouraging President Trump to embrace allies. Don't put tariffs on them. Let's hold their hands and sing Kumbaya and rare earth elements. India is partnering with Kazakhstan. They are rich in 15 of the 17 rare earth elements for potential supply agreements and private sector-led mining joint ventures. So quite interesting. They're trying. Let's give them an A for trying. Yeah. Probably a C for where they're at execution right now. And on that, I'll step back.
Yeah. I think it's good. I like that there's a plan in place. It's kind of like, where do you see yourself in 20 years? I think that's what India's done, is they're like, this is where we want to be in 20 years. It would probably take them all of 20 years to actually get there. So I think it'll be interesting. I think there's a lot to be said about simply just having a plan of how do we get from where we're at today to where we want to be, for all the reasons you just said, more independence and less reliance on other countries. But as we've said in other podcasts too, right, that the world is too small to do it all on your own. And so hopefully India, in their partnership with Kazakhstan and other countries, hopefully that they can get the resources they need, whether it's technology to bridge some of those gaps or whatever to really get there. And honestly, if they're marginally successful, it's probably a playbook that we need to copy here in the United States.
I would agree. That's why I said I like the way India is thinking. I think they're thinking a little bit more of an industrial policy direction than we are. Although I don't want to underestimate what President Trump is doing now. He has enacted a couple executive orders. He has enacted a 232, which is sort of an act that can trigger actions. They're studying the situation now. I think that they're very, very aware of what the problems are. So I wouldn't be surprised if we were doing more behind the scenes and we just don't know about it.
Well, and I agree, right? I think the Trump administration, they're doing a lot. Obviously, they're disrupting a lot of what has been done. However, the one knock that I would give them right now is they're not very transparent about what the plan is. It feels very reactionary, and everyone is reacting to the reaction.
That's right.
And it's causing a lot of angst and negative feelings. And so while there is probably a lot going on in the background, getting that broad support is probably going to be harder to come by because people are already feeling burnt by what's going on.
Well, I think that, sorry to interrupt you, but that's sort of how Trump operates, and he has unprecedented power now. I mean, for him, 5% was a mandate, and he handpicked his cabinet, people that would support him. Because remember, last time, I'm not crazy about everything he does, but I will tell you, last time, you had real saboteurs that tried to get in the way of the guy even doing his job. So I think I can understand, I can have empathy why somebody would go about what they're doing the way they're doing it. We got problems, but I think they are aware of the problem here. I think, we're going to keep trying to influence our own government to think more holistically about this. I think you have to take a plan and execute. I do.
Yeah. Wow. Well, it's an interesting perspective. Trump can't trust his inner circle, so he's got to play everything close to the chest. I can appreciate that, but he's not the only one that can make America great again. It's going to take all of us.
Yeah. 100%.
Include us.
We have to make ourselves great again, Dustin.
That's right. Anyway, it's honestly, it's truly fascinating to see what other countries are doing in conjunction with what we're trying to do. Like we're seeing it at a global scale, and maybe it's coincidence, right? It's everyone's trying to do it at the same time, is what it feels like. Could be wrong in that assumption. Others could be like, hey, we've been working on this 10 years and we're just finally executing. But it just seems like it's all happening at the same time. And so it's just interesting to see probably where maybe we're getting ideas from other countries. Like, oh, hey, I like that idea. Let's also do it here. So things are moving and they're, although it's going to be a long process, it feels like it'll be a quick one at the same time.
Yeah, I kind of understand what you're saying. Look, I think just in wrapping this up, if we just look at what we've done, Dustin, we started this, rare earths has really started to become well known. I know you know this, and we've got more content. We've had experts tell us, in this field that we have more compelling content than any other media source in the world. That's number one. And the site's only, 6 months old?
It's a little older than that.
Little older than that. About half a year, a little bit older, half a year. So you got news, you got a podcast, you got the forum where, we're starting to get more and more people to go in there, investors, talk about these things, these topics. We have the projects and rankings, and we're going to be ranking not only light rare earths, but also heavies, the refineries and processors, magnet manufacturers, and recycling technology companies, and conferences and other things. And so what we're doing is we're building a platform for the retail investor to get a better understanding of how, if they're going to put money into all of this, how to do it, what to be careful of, and hopefully will help people make better decisions.
Yeah, there's a lot in the works for sure. So subscribe to the newsletter. This can be the best place to get the latest update on what's going on when these rankings that Daniel was just talking about actually hit the main website. and are available for everyone to review and consume. So just another shameless plug right there to come join the newsletter. With that, Daniel, thanks for recording another podcast and providing your insights on what's going on. We'll be back next week. So
Always a pleasure, Dustin.
yes, so great. Thanks everyone. We'll catch you next week.